Are Scott Ringwelski, Kevin Spaeth, and Geoff Gatley, and Art Levine out of his 1930s costume. Great radio show if you listen to Art. Speaking of radio, our tale for you today is about controversy in the 1930s, a discovery that was maybe going to make our city wealthy or not, and I've introduced our actors, and I'm sorry, I left my script. So the city was abuzz in the 1930s with controversy. Scott is portraying Glen Clark, local businessman and port commissioner. This is his grave we're visiting. And Geoff is the dedicated reporter chronicling the controversy. Kevin is our narrator. We offer this story in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Port of Long Beach. Who owns the oil?
Things haven't changed much in Long Beach since the 1930s. Well, okay, maybe they have a little bit. Sure seem to be a lot more people here today. And the harbor and downtown sure has seen its fair share of changes. But the city still has its scandals here and there. Some things never change. Back in 1930s, the big news in town was oil. A large deposit had been discovered under the harbor, and there was a lot of money to be made from it, and several competing interests involved.
Now that's a great place to start a scandal. Oil, money, politics, scandal.
Well, thanks for that introduction. Hi folks, my name is Glen Clark, and I proudly served on the Harbor Commission here in the city of Long Beach from 1931 to 1939. I was ousted, along with my compatriot Frederick Millard, in a scheme by the city to expedite the drilling of oil in the harbor, but I get way ahead of myself there. Born in Missouri in 1890, I came to Long Beach in 1920, back before they discovered oil here. And in those days, this was a premier resort town. They had everything here. They had the pike, and they had the plunge, and they had beautiful young girls with bobbed hair and short dresses that showed their knees, and they would dance and dance marathons all night long. Of course, I was living here with my beautiful and lovely wife, Mary Lou. Sorry, Mary Lou got distracted there. And we were living at the Broadland Hotel at the corner of Linden and Broadway in Long Beach. I was a very successful businessman. I was a tobacco wholesaler back in an era when smoking was considered suave, sexy, sophisticated. Goodness, how attitudes have changed since the 1930s. I don't think you could smoke in any of the restaurants on Pine Avenue anymore. It's a shame. Anyway, I was appointed to the Harbor Commission in 1931, and it was a great honor. I was joined at that time by John Craig of Craig Shipyard, certainly you've heard of him, and Harvey Fremming, who is one of the founders of the Committee for Industrial Organizing. You know that today as the AFL-CIO. In the early 1930s, the harbor was pretty quiet, pretty small, but all of that changed in 1936 when they discovered oil under the harbor. There were fortunes to be made in oil, and the city wanted its due.
Now the city, the state, and the feds could all lay claim to the land above the oil, hence they all believe they own the oil underneath it. Whoever got there first would have the advantage of getting the most oil, and thus the most money out of it. In Huntington Beach, a little town south of here, the city delayed in their decisions, and private interests swooped in and got the rights to drill their Toddlands oil.
That's a real possibility that private oil companies come into Long Beach and get all the oil concessions.
Just like today, bureaucracies moved slowly in the 1930s. Some things never change.
Dateline, Washington, D.C., 1939. Senator Gerald P. Nye of North Dakota introduces a bill in the U.S. Senate claiming that the marginal seas of all U.S. states is actually the property of the federal government under public domain. If he's successful in passing this bill, that would mean the oil and the revenue from it would belong to Uncle Sam.
Okay, I ask you, what could North Dakota possibly know about it? coastal state? Clearly, this bill was in direct violation of, well, everything that this city stands for, and in direct conflict with our best interests. So, as a result, we argued that, you know what, the state had given us the titlings way back in 1911, long before anyone ever knew there was ever any oil.
Now, the only thing that the city and the Harbor Commission could agree upon was that the Nye bill was a bad, bad bill for the city of Long Beach and for the port.
There are many options on the table with how to deal with this issue.
Essentially, there were 260 acres of oil, and an urgency by the city to get contracts in place before private landholders start drilling on their own.
Now, if the city made the normal contracts with private oil companies to drill that oil, the state would have claimed they were in violation of the 1911 grant, giving them the tideless. If the state was able to do that, then they would successfully own all the oil underneath it, and the revenue from pumping that oil would flow up to Sacramento.
And that's what happened at the city of Los Angeles, at the Venice oil field. You know what Venice is? There was oil underneath there. So they gave it to private companies, and guess what? The state came in and said, hey, that's all our money, and they took it. The city got nothing.
We had a different plan. We got around all those issues that would have sent the ownership back to the state of California. In our plan, we just flat out claimed we owned everything. And we were going to hire a consortium of companies like Hancock and Standard Oil to come in and pump out the oil for us.
This consortium will be known as the Long Beach Oil Development Company.
We call them the LBOD. Essentially, the deal on the table was that the LBOD would pump out the oil for us. Long Beach was going to take care of all the related costs. And after all those costs were essentially paid for, Long Beach would step in and take the lion's share of the profits and give a small percentage to the LBOD for extracting it for us. And I need to mention that there was a city manager by the name of Dorton. He and I didn't see eye to eye on anything, especially the details of this contract.
Now, in a front page editorial, February the 2nd, 1939, we, the Press Telegram, wondered about all the secrecy that's taking place. There's not much information getting out about this oil and all the negotiations.
Fact is, the only secret the Harbor Commission is keeping is that they can't agree on anything and are at an impasse.
Well, see, on one side of the scale was my compatriot, Commissioner Millard, and myself. On the other side of the scale was the rest of the Harbor Commission and the City Council. So we stalled on the decisions and the votes. In Congress, you'd call it filibustering, I guess.
Meanwhile, private interests are coming in and sinking wells while the commission dilly-dallies. Dilly-dallies.
On February 21st, 1939, Dorton, the city manager, and the Long Beach City Council, in a unanimous vote, has removed from our positions on the commission. Millard was immediately replaced by a fellow by the name of Carl Schenck. Now, Carl was a real estate developer. He and his partner, McGrath, they dredged and built and developed what is today known as Naples Island and Belmont Shore. He also had a small interest in a local ice company. Amazingly enough, 1 week later, Carl had to resign from the commission. It seems that someone found in the fine print of the commission's charter a proviso that said that no public utilities manager could possibly serve on the commission. And as we all know, what water, electricity, telephones, and ice vendors, public utilities. How'd that happen? Oh, and a couple of years after that, in the early 1940s, a group of engineers came down to take a look at the harbor. And guess what they discovered?
What'd they discover?
They discovered that the harbor was sinking! Yes, it's called subsidence. Happens when you pump before you think. Okay, imagine a giant cake. It's got frosting on it, it's got a pudding filling, and the frosting is the water, and the cake is the soil, and the pudding is the oil. You stick a straw in there and you start sucking out the pudding, and eventually the entire cake caves in on itself. Now, I'm no engineer, but that's a nice, simple explanation of what subsidence is.
Sounds like you drink my milkshake. Now, the city and the oil companies would never admit that the subsidence was caused by the drilling of oil. But it was. Many millions of dollars have been spent to raise the harbor, but many, many, many more millions have been gotten from pumping the oil out of the harbor.
For over 70 years, 70, Long Beach has been receiving money from that oil down there because of the actions of this consortium. Think of the millions that have come into Long Beach in the last 70 years.
Okay. Yes, I was removed from the Harbor Commission by the city, but I remained a citizen in excellent standing within this community. I was a Mason. I was a member of the Shriners. I was a member of the Elks Club. I was a member of the Pacific Coast Club and the Virginia Country Club and the Long Beach Yacht Club. Whoa. And I was an honorary Missouri Colonel. So, I did well. My business continued to do well because throughout my entire life and beyond, smoking remained suave, sexy, sophisticated. I look at things today and I like what I see. Harbor has new challenges. Of course, they're always expanding. Electrification is an issue. Security is a big issue. Oh, and hey, honey, the Broadland Hotel, it's still there. Yeah, and the harbor is also celebrating its 100th anniversary. I know, yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. Overall, I am very proud of the small part that I played in the history of the Port of Long Beach. And I want to thank all of you for coming today and listening to a small part of my personal history. And I also want to finally say that when you hear or read or think about oil in Long Beach and the Tidelands, you think of me.
On behalf of the Historical Society of Long Beach, I want to thank all of you for your support. This is where history lives. Well, most of the time.